Hello, welcome back to Tech Type Podcasts. My name is Simeon.
Hey, it's Ben.
I'm Dale.
So, episode 13 we're heading into now, and there's been a little bit of trouble in tech lately. Around, if you're in Australia anyway, you might have seen there's been a little warning sign popping up in places on Google. That's on the Google search, and if you go onto YouTube as well. What's this all about, Dale? What's the problem?
If you're listening to Google, they are under attack. The Australian government is going to try and make them give away your user data. They're going to have to pay truckloads of money to Australian media businesses. Well, according to Google. The Australian government's come out with a new bill, new legislation, essentially saying that Google has to make up for lost profits from Australian news corporations. That they're claiming that they're missing profits due to how Google's search engine displays information. You can just Google a news story and it'll just pop up with little snippets from the article, and you might never ever click on that article. So the ACCC wants to make sure that those media companies are made right, and it doesn't look like Google's very happy about it.
Yeah, so basically Google has put up this little warning sign, and it's a bit confusing, and have a letter that goes along with it that basically is saying that your Google experience could be changing soon if these laws go ahead, and it's a little bit of misrepresentation on Google's side. It's sort of basically saying that you might have to start paying for Google services, which it doesn't seem like Google have to pay these companies a ton of money. It's basically just showing that Google is benefiting from these media organizations, and therefore they should be paying for those benefits. Whereas Google has sort of said that your user data will be able to be shared to everyone and all this sort of stuff, where the Australian government's saying, no, not at all. We don't want you to change how Google is working. We just think that these media companies should get this kickback. Are you on one side or the other? Do you think it's fair that Google should have to pay these companies?
I think it's a bit of a funky situation. Just from the get-go, the actual legislation is odd. It's well, I don't know. I'd say almost broad. It's a bit too broad. It's not very specific. It outlines that Google's going to have to share. What is it? If the media company requests information about how Google will be displaying their content, they have to respond about that. It also proposes,
so I guess, Google
some payment.
is getting a bit scared.
Google doesn't want to pay them money.
Because
that's.
I think it's a little bit of that. I think it's also they don't want a precedent to be set, because the whole thing about Google search especially is that they control the secret source, the secret algorithm, and that no one else can see that, and therefore, you can help rank things better, and you can help get your website more traffic, but you don't quite know how this Google algorithm is working. And if, for example, these news organizations know that, they will just be bang right at the top, and these tiny little news sites and people on YouTube who are trying to, promote them as a, self-promoted news person or whatever, they don't get a chance anymore because they don't know these algorithms. But also, Google's had some big problems in the past with fake news around, a lot of different things, but people, jumping the gun on these things and putting out these YouTube videos, and then these going viral and all this stuff, and Google having to be like, oh, wait a minute, that's actually not true. Oh no, what are we going to do? Whereas some of these bigger news places do a little bit more of their due diligence of fact checking and things normally. And so if Google's getting benefit for that, shouldn't they have to pay? Is it another way of sort of Google being a bit sneaky and being this monopoly like we were talking about last week?
I think it's easy to paint Google in a bad light, and I mean, I wouldn't be the first to defend them. They basically just want to protect their profits here, don't they? But there's sort of two sides to it. I don't think that the sort of the legislation that they're trying to bring in, it's gonna it's gonna benefit very specific news corporations much more than others. It's not gonna benefit independent news sources. It's not going to benefit state news sources. So ABC and SBS, who, if you're sort of keeping up, the ABC isn't really getting any more funding than it used to. They're constantly facing different cuts here and there, and this sort of just lays down the groundwork for private media to take over even more share of the news. And as they're private sources, that just, they can be influenced, I guess, by ownership, by money. And while I don't think it's I don't think Google's a small sliver of Google's profits are actually that important. I think that giving these private companies the opportunity to manipulate the search algorithms, change up the way that they post their news to make it more palatable, I guess it is, or more available on the searches, put it up higher on the news search. It's any sort of opportunity for manipulation isn't very good, I think.
Yeah, I think, especially if you look at it from Google's perspective, Australia is probably a small to mid-sized market share in the news and media kind of sphere. So if they let it slide in Australia, they back down to the government. The government implements this new policy, this new legislation. It can have a knock-on effect over to Europe and America, where the market share is a lot larger for Google. So from that standpoint, I can kind of see where they're battling really hard at the start, because it's kind of like a domino effect. If you let Australia slide, then all of a sudden America wants to do it and Europe wants to do it, and the whole Google media ecosystem is just gone then.
Yeah, that's why I think they're a little bit afraid, and trying to get everyone to sort of like they've been putting it onto YouTube and stuff and saying, hey, if you don't want this to happen, tell the Australian government. And it actually hasn't just been in Australia. They're sort of trying to get like people in Europe, like you say, to also say to the Australian government, hey, we don't want any Google to change, not just in Australia, sort of thing. So yeah, I think that is a very good point that that you make. I don't know if Google will change from this. I like to hope not. I like how sort of free most of Google's services are, but I'm not exactly sure. Do they have a number of how much money they are expected to be paying out these companies? Do we know yet? I don't think they've come out and said that.
Yeah, they haven't released any numbers on it, not that I've found.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows how much it will be, but normally these things are quite, well, I mean, it's a lot of money to you and me, but it's normally quite small amounts to the Googles of the world.
Any more Herald quotes, the search engine giant and rival Facebook could pay up to $1 billion annually in compensation to publishers.
Okay, so $1 billion. Yeah,
that's going to be going to a lot of different media companies.
Yeah, it's spread out a fair bit.
Honestly, that is a very small part of their yearly income as a company.
So it's also interesting that it's not just Google this is affecting. It sort of might seem like it is because you only really see it on Google, but this is actually really affecting Facebook as well. And they are just not reacting to it at all. I'm sure they've got legal teams looking at it, and I'm sure they've got people behind the scenes going, what are we going to do about this? But they're really stepping back in terms of the consumer's sort of view of this and letting Google just sort of not take all the rap, but be the pushers of it. Do you think that's wise for Facebook to be sort of stepping back, or should they be as well pushing this?
I think Facebook has got a lot on their plate at the moment. they seem to be in the news for all the wrong reasons. Is that the reason that they're not taking this on? Yeah, possibly. Could be another reason. They might have taken a different path to Google, which they obviously have in their public side.
And I guess, so for Facebook, it's been a bit even more interesting because Facebook has seriously done a lot of those like reaction things, and it has thrown media out completely. Like they jumped to video all of a sudden. They just went, yeah, we're pushing video real quick, and they can do that. You know, being this tech company on the platform, that's fine. But all these media organizations had to overnight just become a video producer. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days later, Facebook goes, no, we're actually going to forget that. You don't have to do that anymore. That was just a sort of bit of a trial. And so they are asking for, I think, 28 days notice when these algorithms and stuff change. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing as well, because 28 days notice for a tech company, if they're changing things, is ridiculous. That's like, they don't know what they're doing.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah, they don't know what they're going to do next week. So I think the 28 days notice is a little bit unreasonable, but I can also understand that for these sort of slower moving companies, news and stuff, to be that reactive and to be able to completely change gear to camera crew instead of just audio or whatever, that's really hard. And so the smaller ones do benefit from that, but the big organizations just can't jump around that quick. Is that a fair thing for Google to be starting to do, you reckon? At least that much?
I think that's just like a real classic example of the Australian government interacting with anything technology. Our government has proven time and time again that they don't have a very good understanding of technology or what it entails, what sort of legislation actually would work. You remember all of that, the encryption legislation that they came up with. Hey, we're going to need permission. We're going to legislate that any tech company that's producing software with encryption will need to provide us with a backdoor if requested.
Yeah, that didn't really go anywhere, did it?
That's not how encryption works. That's not how it works, and it completely defeats the purpose of encryption. So, I think this is just another example of them, not being very savvy, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so there's been a bit of other stuff happening at the moment between sort of tech companies and stuff. I'm sure if anyone has played Fortnite recently, they would have seen that there's a little bit of backlash at Apple. So this is Epic Games. Well, yes, exactly. So exactly. So Epic Games, who owns Fortnite, has been pulled off the Apple App Store for iPhones. And basically what has happened is that the in-app purchases within Fortnite, Epic Games didn't use the Apple official way of doing it, let's say, with the so using Apple accounts and all this sort of stuff. And they've done a different way of doing it to buy what's called V-Bucks, which is currency within Fortnite. And Apple isn't too happy with that, and so they've said, "No, you violated our terms and conditions," and they've pulled it off all iPhones and pulled it off the App Store. This is, again, really close to what we were talking about last week. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. Yeah, big monopoly, and telling them the way that they can and can't basically run their companies, or run these apps on the Apple App Store. What's going on there?
See this
what's that?
as more of Epic Games trying to tell Apple how they should run their business.
Really?
Because, I mean, I think it's pretty simple, actually. Epic Games didn't want to pay Apple the 30% cut that they agreed to pay on the App Store. And so when they tried to, skirt around the rules, Apple said, no, we're not going to let that slide. And honestly, I think Apple's the most reasonable out of the two at this point. Not that this is really a fight that I care who wins personally, but I think Apple has the sort of
so is that
I wouldn't call it moral, but
is that because Epic Games is
more correct?
It's who they're owned by? Is it because they're sort of this whole idea about them being a Chinese backed brand and all this sort of stuff?
I think it being Chinese is or Chinese owned is kind of irrelevant. They just want more money. This is just two big corporations that want more money.
Yeah, it's a little like the TikTok that they are backed by this Chinese brand, and so they obviously, like you say, don't want to pay the 30%, but I don't know if it's really fair. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of devices they're being pulled off. So for anyone who hasn't seen, it's basically a Fortnite-ified version of a very old Apple ad. And from back in the
somewhere?
90s, 80s, late 80s. And so basically it's this very sort of sci-fi crazy weird ad, and they've basically used Fortnite characters to sort of reproduce it. It's a clever idea. The one of the funny things is that this old Apple ad has had a serious increase in views on YouTube lately because all these sort of young people who are playing Fortnite never saw that ad, and so they're going back and watching it now, which is a bit funny. But it's this whole idea about the monopolies, and actually when this original ad was running from Apple, they were sort of the underdogs, and they were doing sort of these similar things with using, being the small company compared to IBM, and so they were trying to get this leg up and trying to sort of twist the rules a little bit in their favor, and now it's the exact same thing happening with Fortnite. Them sort of trying to twist these things, but again, it's sort of this monopoly idea that is a bit scary.
Well, yeah, it's the same situation with Google Play, right? Google Play demands a cut when you're advertising your app on its store, but the difference between Android and Apple is you can't install an app on your iPhone unless it's approved by Apple and it has a license and it's through the App Store. You won't be able to add it to your phone unless it's cracked or a developer app. But on Android, you can just download the APK from what is it? It's on Samsung, the Samsung website. They have this version of Fortnite that you can just go into your browser on your phone, download, and it'll install.
So it's also been pulled off Google as well. Like you say, it's so not just Apple.
You can still play it on your Android phone. So you could say that the monopoly discussion about Google is sort of less existent, because you can still play it on Android.
Yeah.
It's just Apple is not giving any room.
So do you think Apple
they're not budging here.
Do you think Apple needs to allow, side-loading apps like Google does, Ben? Or do you think that's just never going to happen?
I think Apple,
not for Apple
has taken a very strict direction in where they're going. Their whole ecosystem is built around, maintaining security, building up the walls in their ecosystem. It'll be a long day after hell freezes over when Apple allows any third-party apps into their sacred app store. I honestly don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. I reckon Apple will probably yield to some extent to Fortnite.
Yeah, or some sort of cross between the both. They'll sort of be like...
Yeah, there was some kind of... Before it all really blew up, there was kind of a lot of communication between Tim Cook and the CEO of Unreal Engine or Fortnite or whoever it is. Epic Games trying to strike a bit of a deal. And then, Fortnite, Unreal Engine kind of threatened what we're seeing now. And it was interesting that Apple still didn't want to negotiate, even though they have with some other larger clients. So I think Amazon struck a deal with Apple with their in-purchase payments. So it's interesting, where they've drawn the line.
I mean, so Fortnite and Epic Games, as an extension, sort of have drummed up this sort of thing that they're this small underdog fighting Apple. Is that really true? They're not really that small. So, I mean, like you say...
Absolutely
yeah, but why are they sort of...
They've been spending the last however many months expanding their Epic Games Store, which is their competitor for Steam. If you've used it, I know a lot of people have used it. I'm pretty sure all three of us have been. They've been offering a lot of free games to get people to download it and start using it. Me included, I guess. GTA for free is something you just can't pass up. But
oh gosh, no.
I see it as it's a very aggressive move.
Do you think they're big enough to have this sort of power, in quotes, over Apple, and have? Do you think it will come to this sort of all blow over and you'll be like, oh, whatever happened to that? And it'll just be like, oh, no one really knows, but there's this deal behind the scenes sort of thing.
I see it as, they had a couple options. They could have made a deal with Apple, like Amazon did, to have a less of a share of the payments. They could have just gone to court about this problem and not retaliated, I guess. I'm not sure if I'd call it a retaliation, but they basically just said, stuff you, Apple. We're gonna do it. We're gonna take these payments. If you don't like it, you can get rid of us. And Apple said,
went, we'll get rid of you then.
All right. Yeah, they called their bluff essentially.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't think Apple could have gone a different way about this.
It's interesting. It's happening at the same time as what's happening in Congress at the moment, like we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
It's a little bit too coincidental, but I will be surprised if Apple is that upset about it. As big as Fortnite is, and has millions of downloads as it has had on iPhone, and I'm sure with Google as well. They kind of just, it's not really like they just go, whatever, we'll just make millions somewhere else kind of thing.
Do you think that 30% too much? Like 30%
is a lot.
It hasn't changed, which I think is interesting. Yeah, I think it is a lot, but they also... What does Google take? I'm not exactly sure what Google takes. Do you guys know how much?
Is it
similar?
Yeah, have a look at that then.
App payments. I think I've always thought that Google's similar, but maybe it's not. But look, I think they do provide a lot to creators, app developers. They do create a lot of APIs, and they do create. I mean, they have an entire store for them to post this on. So I don't know. Maybe there'd just be sort of an open source way of side loading apps if there weren't these two app stores.
But
a bit of a nice
Google's
way. But
30% as well. But they allow third parties.
Yeah.
in.
So I mean, right. I guess that they do, and I understand that, but do they really? Like they do. You technically can do it, and even on Apple, you can run web apps that are now becoming more and more powerful, and sort of can run. And this is Apple's argument whenever government comes and says you control the whole thing. They go, oh, actually, there's web apps, which is true. But I think as much as you can sideload it, most people on Android would have no idea how to sideload that. They just go through the Google Play Store. So technically, yes, but really, do they actually have a place you can easily get third-party apps? I don't know. I think 30% is a lot, but I don't know, I'm trying to think of other examples where, it seems a little bit unreasonable, like in the retail industry, someone takes their big cut. But I guess it's just so new, and these two apps are sort of the only platforms that this happens. I guess a little bit Microsoft, but I don't know. I think 30%.
It's a lot of money.
It is.
I don't. The thing is that as an app developer, and I can see Epic Games' point here. They've gone about this in the most aggressive way possible, which I can respect. They're not sort of f***ing around with this. But the app developers don't really have a place to actually negotiate fairly, right? You're an app developer. What do you say to Apple, who's demanding 30% of your transactions? No. Oh, okay. I now can't publish my app on iOS, and you're stuffed. There's no real way to.
Yeah, there's nowhere else to put it, I guess.
Yeah, there's no fair ground to really negotiate, and you can't go to Google because
I think
charges exactly the same.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they charge the same amount. I wouldn't be surprised if they sort of have had a little bit of a
collusion there.
A little bit of an under the table handshake, and just said, yeah, well, that's what the market can hold. And so if both of them are the same, then everyone goes, oh, well, that must be what app developers are okay with. So just
you say that, and that is a very monopolistic.
Well, exactly.
Move.
That's what I'm sort of saying. It's just like, well, maybe it's not actually what they can hold, but that's what it looks like. Not. So the App Store makes Apple in 2019 made them $50 billion. I don't quite know how much it's made app developers, but it's a lot of money. I mean, for Google, I would say it's probably similar to that. Maybe not quite as much, but probably similar. And so, they go, well, take one of those billions and give it to some news producers. There's your news payoff. But it is a lot of money. It's a lot of money that's not in the hands of developers, but also they make it very easy to build apps. Very easy to build apps now because of these, they provide tools to produce apps. They, it's a couple of lines of code and there's an entire mapping system built into your app, which if you had to do yourself.
But that's not the developers' issue to deal with. That's the companies should be doing that because they're going to be the ones that benefit from having apps on their system. So, Apple and Google should be making it as easy as possible. Developers shouldn't have to pay for that because it's like, well, you should be incentivizing me.
I think it goes both ways. I think it's a big argument maybe for a possibly different podcast. But anyway, better wrap it up there, boys. It's been good to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I'll catch you guys next week.
All right.
Yeah, catch you next week.
All right, boys. Talk to you then.
All right.
Bye bye.
See you.
Yeah, yeah.